Hey everybody, it's Stephen Brooke and welcome to Architectural Photography and Composition, and I want to talk about the role of architectural photographers and historic preservation. I was really honored to be part of Exposure 2022 that was held in Sharjah in the UAE, and I was surrounded by brilliant, dedicated photographers from all fields. And the idea of Sharjah was to celebrate the power of photography, to raise public awareness and affect real change, whether to save our oceans, to protect endangered wildlife, to report on the horrors in conflict zones, or preserving and protecting the environment and the ways of life of indigenous people throughout the world. And I've listed a few of these wonderful photographers that I met, and I have their Instagram handles, and please check out their work. They are dedicated to using photography as a real tool to affect change, and I was moved and inspired just to be in their presence. And so I thought, while I was coming back, what can we as architectural photographers, what more can we do with our skills? And I thought back, well, here's what Piranesi, we all know his views of Rome. Here's what Piranesi said about why he did what he did. He said, seeing that the remains of the ancient buildings of Rome, scattered for the most part in gardens and fields, are being day by day reduced by the injuries of time or by the greed of their owners, who secretly demolish them to sell the rubble for modern houses, I decided to preserve them in these places. So here's Piranesi, who produced the seminal views of Rome, and he's doing it in the service of historic architectural preservation. Frederick Evans, if you don't know his work, documented all the really important British cathedrals. He lived from 1853 to 1943, hauled around a big view camera and did these wonderful, wonderful photographs, all in black and white, of these historic cathedrals. Louis Sullivan's buildings in Chicago were documented by wonderful photographer John Zarkowski, and he has a number of books on Louis Sullivan, and in those books are buildings of Louis Sullivan that were trashed. They were wonderful brick buildings, skyscrapers, before the era of really modern skyscrapers. And here's one, this is the Garrick Theater, which was demolished in 1961. And in his book are a number of Louis Sullivan's buildings. Now all you see are the photographs. Buildings are gone. When I first came to Miami, there was a building by Henry Hohauser, who's an architect, the New Yorker Hotel. They think that's one of his really best buildings. And in 1980, it was torn down, literally at the break of dawn. The wrecking balls came in and the New Yorker was gone. And it was the destruction of the New Yorker that really got people involved in trying to protect the Art Deco district of Miami Beach. And in the end, it was the first post-1900s neighborhood to be given this kind of umbrella of protection by the National Historic Protection. And David Morton, who was the senior editor of Progressive Architecture, put a photograph of mine on the cover in November 1982, and that cover did a lot for turning the heads of architects who dismissed the Art Deco buildings as just trash, when in fact they were done by really wonderful architects, Beaux-Arts trained, who were celebrating the modern era and who looked at machine age motifs, and really they were beautiful buildings. And on top of that, they created a wonderful urban cityscape, when people argued that, well, modernist buildings couldn't create real human scale. Well, yes, of course they can. And I did a book with Barbara Capitman, who spearheaded what was really full contact historic preservation. These were down and dirty meetings with commissioners to try to shake them by the neck to tell them you have architectural treasures here on the beach that are deserving of being saved. And so we all succeeded in this, and of course Miami Vice came to town and made that district famous. But in spite of that, even though the district became a cash cow, the Senator Hotel, which was an L. Murray Dixon building in '39, was demolished in 1988, and just unceremoniously demolished. And there were movements to try to save it, and they said, well, we're going to put up another hotel there. Well, they didn't do anything. It ended up being a parking lot, and one of the really great iconic buildings on Collins Avenue was destroyed. I've been involved with Dade Heritage Trust, which is an advocacy group in Miami. Their little building is an historic building. It was Dr. Jackson's hospital building. And every year we put out in Preservation Today Miami's 10 most endangered buildings. And I'm very active with them. I try to do as much as I can to help support their efforts. And I shoot these buildings, and I shoot them as if they were finished products, finished jobs, already done, already beautiful, to give people an idea of what they could look like if money was put into their renovation. And I have a Miami Historic Neighborhoods project where I'm going around to photograph these neighborhoods which are becoming, they're really vulnerable, and the more that climate change and flooding occurs, people are moving inland, and they're moving into these little neighborhoods and wrecking the scale of them. And some of these are Miami neighborhoods that go back to the late 1800s, which for Miami is that's a relatively old area. I know if you're from Boston, say, well, 300-year-old is old. But here, for Miami, 50, 60, 70 years old are old buildings. And I work with Megan McLaughlin and Placerbia Design, and they put out these surveys of the historic neighborhoods. So my work is used in these books. So, but there are ongoing historic preservation efforts from people in our community. I want to show you just a few of them. Thomas Ryan has a series of photographs from Tasmania and also from Australia, and he's been documenting abandoned Art Deco buildings, and you can pause this and read what he has to say. But this was a wonderful old building on 10 Murray Street, and when he made this photograph, he thought to himself, this is the last time I'm going to see this building, and it was demolished shortly after he took this photograph. Our friend Benno Sardzik, who lives in the UAE, has been photographing the historic coastal town of Mirbat in Oman, and there are buildings that are abandoned there, and he's been photographing those to keep a record of them. Armin Hermer lives in Malta. He is a master archer, but also a wonderful photographer who does most of his work in black and white. And he's documenting the historic buildings on Manuel Island. And one of these, this is an island hospital that was used as a quarantine site. It's now owned by a business enterprise, and they are planning yacht harbor and shops and all that. And it will change the nature of those buildings. If they're kept, it's going to change their nature, or some of them might be destroyed, and Armin is documenting them. And Majid Al-Bastaki, I met him in the UAE. He's from Sharjah, and he went and found a whole series of historic photos. And again, the Sharjah is new, and these developments go back only about 50, 60 years. And he found a whole series of photographs, and he's gone back now. He's an architecture student, but also a really good architectural photographer. And he's gone back and photographed these areas, and he said he's going to continue to do this as part of his work. He's going to go back to each of these areas periodically to keep track of how the architecture in his area is being maintained. So let me leave you with a thought that I keep, and I've quoted it in my books, by John Ruskin, the British art historian. And he says that a nation's buildings must reflect and project its citizens' highest aspirations, that buildings embody the sculpture and moldings of the national soul. And he says, if the architecture of the present reflects a nation's highest values, so also does a nation's attitude towards its architectural heritage. So what I want to ask of you, whether you do work for architects or designers or landscape architects, or you do real estate work, whatever it is that you do, I want to encourage you to join the ranks of these architectural photographers who are using their skills in the service of architectural preservation. And believe me, just like the photographers that I met at Exposure 2022, your work could affect real change and increase public awareness of the value of historic preservation. What I'd love for you to do, if you're already engaged in this work, consider sending me one photo of what you're doing, so that I can show them all in a later video. 3 to 5 megabytes, color or black and white, a caption, and how you would like it to be credited. And just send it to me at stephen@stephenbrooke.com. The only reason I would like to use these is to publicize, use my channel, use this vehicle to show the work that's been going on, that I can show it around and let other photographers know that this is something that they can do with their skills that will be of tremendous value in maintaining architectural preservation and architectural history wherever you may live. If you'd like to support the site, please consider purchasing a copy of Architectural Photography and Composition. You can get it at stephenbrookephotography.com. It's inexpensive, and every page has something that I think will help you with your work. So again, please think about donating your services to the cause of architectural preservation, historic preservation. Thanks for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.